on the round the back of the head. Nick Lenz could go out here.
This is bad. Here, he's got a Oliveira. Injuries and all sorts of trouble.
Charles Oliveira can easily be mistaken for a puny nerd, but in the octagon, you can't confuse him with anyone else.
Follow, you see me working on that alone. Wow!
Throughout his 12-year career in the UFC, the Brazilian has reached the judge's decision only thrice, setting multiple records. He has scored the most submission wins in the organization's history, and the most finishes, as well as victories using exotic techniques.
Man, nice transitioning.
In 2021, Bronx finally got hold of the championship belt. After that, he took the #1 contenders out of the way. Soon, Charles will be facing another title shot against Islam Makhachev. It is time to walk through Oliveira's path from favelas to the very top of the world MMA rankings.
And there's the tap. Charles Oliveira.
Look out! Trying for another submission, and there is the tap.
Charles was born in the Brazilian town of Guarujá, near Sao Paulo, in the family of a janitor and a slaughterhouse worker. He grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, so ever since childhood, he had to work hard helping his mother peddle salads on the streets. Oliveira could have become a soccer player, but from the age of 7 was forced to struggle for his health. At first, a heart murmur and then rheumatic fever were diagnosed, which severely affected his ankles and made the boy spend 2 years in the hospital. The doctors told his parents that their son could have become a paraplegic, so sport was out of the question. The worst-case scenario was not realized, but still, Charles had to say goodbye to all of his soccer dreams. The ball was replaced by jiu-jitsu. At the age of 12, Oliveira found himself training at a local Brazilian jiu-jitsu school for the first time. 2 years later, the Brazilian won his first significant title as a white belt. Then he became the winner of South America and the runner-up of the World Cup. There could have been more awards and accolades in grappling if it had not been for mixed martial arts. Initially, Charles used MMA training for maintaining cardio only, but a trip to the famous Shootbox Academy changed everything. Oliveira fell in love with the atmosphere there and was determined to pursue a career in mixed martial arts. At the age of 18, Charles submitted his opponent with an armbar at his first amateur bout. Thus began the blood-pumping warpath of a modest guy nicknamed Bronx. Oliveira got his moniker after moving to the Macaco Gold team. Local favelas are sometimes referred to as the Bronx, and given Oliveira's long life in the poor suburbs, the Brazilian came to be called Bronx, meaning from the Bronx. Charles's first professional fight took place at an old-school one-night welterweight tournament in Sao Paulo. That evening, the Brazilian appeared in the cage 3 times, won the Grand Prix, and instantly made it to the Fight Matrix ratings. Bronx got ranked 202nd amongst the welterweights. Back then, the champ was Matt Serra, who had sensationally taken the belt from George St. Pierre. Apart from them, the top 5 included John Fitch, Jake Shields, and Matt Hughes. From then on, Oliveira never again performed at 170. He racked up several victories in Brazil and got an offer from the US. Charles went to the Ring of Combat event and faced off against Dom Stanko, who was coming off 6 wins and 2 losses. The Brazilian did not think twice about throwing kicks, but was constantly finding himself on the back.
Something your leg gets caught and you go to the ground. Nice right hand by Stanko.
Once Oliveira came under ground and pound, he executed a sweep, and a few seconds later, transitioned to a choke.
Position like nothing. He's got that choke sunk in. Wow.
Charles got the belt, hugged the ring girl, and went back to Brazil. Over the next 10 months, 4 more victories were scored. The first one was over undefeated Alexander Bezerra. Oliveira decided the rival Zero had to go and strangled his compatriot with an anaconda choke. In early 2010, do Bronx managed to appear at another one-day tournament and finished 2 opponents in the first round, then signed a contract with the UFC a few months later. At that time, Charles was ranked 110th, staying ahead of many future and already accomplished stars. The lightweight division was dominated by UFC champion BJ Penn. Diego Sanchez used to be on the list of contenders. Oliveira premiered in the UFC at the age of 20. It was not until 2.5 years later that the organization's own rankings were introduced. Avatar was in cinemas, and the current champions, Ngannou, Adesanya, and Volkanovski, did not make their MMA debut yet. The Brazilian's opponent was a tough wrestler, Darren Elkins, with a record of 11-1. The American quickly completed a takedown.
Got him up and down. Big takedown.
But Charles played it cool and demonstrated his magic on the ground.
Trouble. Oh, he's done.
Oliveira attempted a triangle choke, transitioned to an armbar, and then forced the tap. It took only 41 seconds to grab the W and a submission of the night bonus.
Like Joe said,
A month and a half later, do Bronx appeared on short notice against Efrain Escudero.
Here we go.
Right from the get-go, Charles proceeded to demonstrate the progress of his Thai boxing game.
Things about Oliveira having such an outstanding guard.
Weighed in at 159.
Nice straight right hand.
Efrain was a submission machine early on season 8. Escudero tried to come from a different angle. Again with the little jump.
Flying knees.
Toward the end of the round, he tried to wrestle, but happened to be on his back and took a couple of hefty elbows.
There's the elbows.
Big elbows by Efrain Escudero.
After the break, Oliveira went on to outstrike his opponent.
It's in a battle tonight.
Muay Thai clinch. Jumping double knee.
In the third round, he managed a takedown and wound up on top.
Oliveira's got all of it down.
Trying to get back on feet, Escudero did not notice do Bronx hanging like a backpack on his spine and blocking the oxygen.
He's got it in deep. That's it.
It is all over.
The second appearance in the octagon and the second submission of the night. Charles burst into the world's top 50 rankings for the first time. He had to follow up his success in a bout against Jim Miller, who was among the top 10 lightweights and coming off 5 wins. The American performed a swift takedown, and in the scramble for position, he ventured a knee bar.
One thing into next.
Oliveira did not expect such a maneuver and was forced to save his leg.
Shot to the body.
Jim's got a leg. Oh, it is all over.
Charles fell for this rare submission, which marked the first loss in his career. Despite the setback, the Brazilian continued to face off against the top guys, and his next challenge was the experienced Nick Lentz. He had 25 professional fights under his belt and never lost in the UFC.
And here we go.
Before long, Lentz moved the battle to the floor.
Lentz quickly wants to close the distance.
And you see immediately.
Charles responded with up kicks.
Very active.
Good up kick. Free for now.
Nicely done.
Upon rising, the Brazilian effectively dealt blows from a Thai clinch.
Usually fight at 145 if he chose to. Stand-up technique is. Look how quick that left hook is.
Yep.
Very clean, no wind-up.
In one of the exchanges, Nick missed a curveball of a punch.
Behind it, good stiff jab. Oh my! They traded.
Oliveira rushed to finish him off. Failing to do so, he attempted an anaconda choke and then a guillotine.
Fully mounted, switches over to full guard.
Lentz withstood everything
Great job done by Nick Lentz.
and even brazenly tried to submit Charles.
Guillotine, he's got it. Now full leverage, but he's still holding on to the neck and drops down again. Fair with full mount. Big shots.
do Bronx was not going to give up and stole the end of the dynamic round.
With punches at the same time. Tosses Lentz.
The second started with a flying knee.
Lentz. Flying knee by Oliveira.
Following a scramble on the ground, Charles hit Lentz with an illegal knee,
And again,
Illegal knee.
which went unnoticed by the referee. Oliveira submitted the dazed Nick via rear naked choke, thus causing the crowd to boo.
Standing squeeze. That's it.
It's all over.
Listen to the crowd boo.
The back-and-forth action earned both athletes Fight of the Night honors. However, after reviewing the incident, the result was overturned and a no contest was declared.
Really hurt Nick Lentz. Has shown such incredible...
A month and a half later, in August of 2011, the restless Charles was short-noticed against Donald Cerrone, who was 23rd in the rankings.
Took a laser line to the
Cowboy did not spare the body of the young prospect and routed him in the very first round.
And now Cowboy sensing
Cowboy
the opportunity to finish. Cowboy trying to finish this
shoving it.
fight.
That's it.
And it's
That's
all
it.
over. It is all over.
The defeat set Oliveira back to the 90th position, which made him take stock and do some soul searching. Charles decided to drop down to the 145-pound division. Poor Eric Wisely had his first fight in the UFC, and as luck would have it, he got twisted into a pretzel via a reverse calf slicer.
Looking to finish it quick by
Got it.
submission.
He's caught. He's out of it, but he's got to be careful here because Oliveira's going to take his back.
Man, nice transitioning, and it's all over.
Oh, wow. He had his leg locked in a terrible position.
In the promotion, such technique had never been performed before, so Oliveira went down in history and was rightfully awarded another bonus. Shortly after the event, Charles was honored with a black belt in BJJ. 4 months later, Oliveira reaffirmed his reputation as a boa constrictor. The Ultimate Fighter Season 12 winner, Jonathan Brookins, got squeezed in the Brazilian vice.
That's not what he landing the takedown, but can't get the angle on it if it's up on the neck, but it looks pretty tight here, John. Yep.
And there's the tap. Charles Oliveira. Yet another finish.
The exotic variation of a guillotine with an anaconda hold brought Dubronx to a winning streak.
Finishes it. Beautiful stuff from Charles Oliveira.
Oliveira became the 15th in the rankings and was matched up with yet another star, Cub Swanson, who also had won 2 consecutive bouts inside the distance. Unprepared for such a challenge, Charles did not make weight for the first time and ragdolled in an uncommon delayed knockout as early as the 3rd minute.
Oliveira might be walking that one off. Oh,
Over
good
the
right
top.
hand over the top.
And he's hurt.
Yeah, he's done.
And it is all over.
He's done.
Cub Swanson by knockout.
I think a part of it was that left hook to the body. I think the left hook to the body really hurt him. And he was...
This was followed by a 10-month break and a fight with Frankie Edgar.
And here we go.
Oliveira called it the most important one of his life. Yet lost by decision. Dubronx rolled back in the fight matrix to the 31st line and was stripped of a prospect status, although he was just 23 years old. In 2014, things started picking up for Charles. In February, Oliveira competed in his home country for the first time in 4 years. In front of his native audience, the Brazilian submitted the British Andy Ogle via triangle choke in the 3rd round.
That's very tight now. That's it. There's the tap.
At this event, Performance of the Night awards were introduced. Oliveira scooped up 50 grand. It was the 6th time he'd got a bonus in 10 fights. But that was just the beginning. 4 months later, Dubronx yet again showed the world his grappling skills. In a duel with Hatsu Hioki, Charles transitioned to a guillotine,
Not wasting any time with their submission.
then attempted an anaconda.
Oliveira, look at that, right into. Get it here. He's able to reverse Hioki now.
In the end, he figured things out and merged the 2 chokes into one.
Oliveira looking for that Darce again and again. Now sitting to guard. Moving and choke here, and he's got it.
It's all over. Charles Oliveira, the first to submit.
Some specialized media hailed the submission as the best in 2014. The Brazilian took the 6th victory in the UFC, with all of them being scored by different techniques. A unique achievement, which, apart from Oliveira, only Frank Mir can boast of. In September, Charles again missed weight before a rematch with Nick Lentz. After the ceremony, things were so bad for the Brazilian health-wise that he was pulled out from the fight. As a result, it was not until December that Oliveira returned to the octagon to take on the 10th-ranked Jeremy Stevens. The confrontation turned out to be close, but Dubronx came out victorious thanks to more active work in the clinch and submission threats on the ground.
Look at this beautiful transition. Oliveira taking his time, and he's going to get it. He's separating it away from the torso. He's going to.
But you just wonder how much energy he has exerted. Charles Dubronx.
recent success catapulted Oliveira to the top 10 in UFC rankings for the first time. Young Max Holloway was well behind him. Jose Aldo, Chad Mendes, and Frankie Edgar dominated the division by a long mile. In May 2015, Oliveira finally got a chance to pay back Nick Lentz. They were ranked 9th and 8th in the featherweight division respectively.
Again.
Lentz went forward, mixing wrestling and striking.
Oliveira's hurt. Something happened in his eye.
Charles responded with trademark knees and elbows from the clinch.
By an elbow. Excellent transition. Has not stopped the action, though.
Oh!
Huge right.
Feeling the opponent's weakness, the Brazilian grounded Nick.
Oh, he's down! Down goes Lentz, knee to the body for Oliveira! Lentz trying to stay in the fight!
Wrap up his neck, quick!
However, the American once again demonstrated the durability of his head. The second round kicked off with power wrestling from Lentz, who confidently worked from the top to the very buzzer.
Ooh! Oliveira gets out of harm's way, but Lentz continues.
In the final lap of the match, Nick decided not to reinvent the wheel and turned to grappling again. But this time around, he was punished by Dubronx.
Here's where he's got it. That's tight. That is, he's on the round the back of the head. You can see the agony on the face. That's it.
Charles Oliveira.
Charles pulled off the 4th consecutive victory, took 2 bonuses at once, and climbed to the 7th place in the rankings. He could have been even higher, but Max Holloway soared to the 5th line. The Hawaiian prodigy had already won 6 bouts in a row and replaced the Brazilian as the leading prospect at 145. The status of both was high enough to headline a UFC event. 99 seconds into the bout, Oliveira unsuccessfully attempted a takedown, grabbed his neck, and writhed in pain.
Play jiu-jitsu with this kid.
Yeah, not going to mess around on the canvas.
Oh no.
He was declared unable to continue, so the fight was stopped. The Brazilian was examined by medics, and for 4 hours he could not move a single limb on the left side of his body. The injury was later described as a micro tear of his esophagus, but no surgery was required. A couple of months later, Oliveira resumed training. He did not lose his position in the rankings and got Miles Jury as a rival. The Californian BJJ black belt was among the top 10 lightweights, but decided to drop down to featherweight. Dubronx failed in the weigh-in again. Still, the next day it took him just 3 minutes to deal with Jury by way of a jumping guillotine.
He's got the hands connected. Sorts of trouble.
It's all over! Charles Oliveira by submission!
A few weeks prior to that, Conor McGregor had put together a 13-second miracle and immediately became the main target for a dozen of fighters. Oliveira did not stay away either.
Conor, não fica feliz com a coisa que não é sua. Eu tô chegando para levar o título pro Brasil.
However, the 6th place in the rankings did not make the Brazilian eligible for the notorious Irishman. Instead, Charles was matched up with Anthony Pettis, who, after 3 consecutive defeats, decided to shake up his career a little and move to the 145-pound category. Oliveira went for a takedown at the very first second and invited his adversary to grapple whenever given half the chance to do so.
I don't care how ready you are for that thing. When it lands, it does damage. It's the same angle as his head kick.
The former champion responded with powerful body kicks and a ground and pound.
And again, that buckler
Is vicious.
looking to finish it right here, right now. Connection by...
Starting from the second round, Dubronx began to place shots.
To set up that guillotine.
He said, undoubtedly the most important fight of my life to the body.
But was still prone to losing advantageous positions.
Striker who is constantly looking for chokeouts.
Wants to put pressure on that figure 4 lock, and beautiful. Anthony
At the very beginning of the third lap, Charles successfully executed level change,
gets some out of an excellent take.
but Pettis squeezed the most out of the situation.
Yellow, UFC lightweight champion, fighting at 145 for the first time now.
Excellent guillotine. Both legs.
It is all over! Anthony Pettis!
This failure was followed by yet another painful fiasco at the hands of Ricardo Lamas.
So he's got to be careful, else he's going to get taken down. Get on top. Referee on top. You can't put your.
There's the tap!
Oliveira accepted the fight on 3 weeks' notice and exceeded the category limit by 10 pounds. The Brazilian missed weight for the 5th time, even though a few days before he had been seen enjoying a burger at McDonald's. The UFC was running out of patience with Charles, and the matchmakers forced him to go up to the lightweight division. Do Bronx was predictably kicked out of all the rankings. He had 17 fights in the UFC, and slightly more than half were victorious. So, it was not the best lay of the land for Charles at that point. However, he decided to flip the script and try again. In April 2017, Oliveira faced Will Brooks, a former Bellator champion who had defeated Michael Chandler twice.
All right, ready to go.
Brooks threw a left hook to the liver that ended up in a clinch. This was followed by Do Bronx taking him down with an inside trip. Another slam, and an instant submission by rear naked choke. For the first time in 21 professional fights, Brooks had to tap out, and the Brazilian earned another Performance of the Night bonus. Half a year later, Charles agreed to replace Al Iaquinta against Paul Felder. Officially, this fight was on short notice, though there was more than a month left to prepare. Oliveira scored a takedown at the 22nd second and tried to choke his opponent for several minutes.
Oh, Felder's in a lot of trouble here. That's actually the worst thing Paul could do is step over there. By stepping. Oh, look at this. Now he's got the standing rear naked.
Felder heroically survived, and in the second round landed multiple elbows on his adversary's head from the top.
You heard him there. Oh! Huge elbow.
This might be it. Paul Felder gets Charles Oliveira out of there.
People began to claim that Do Bronx caved in under pressure and was unable to withstand serious damage. Charles got a lot of flack for his lack of power and mass. On one podcast, Oliveira noted having assigned his team to focus on building physical strength as well as bulletproof mentality. 6 months later, Charles took a chance again and accepted a fight on a 10-day notice. Besides, he had to go to Chicago and fight against the local darling, Clay Guida, in his hometown. In the middle of the first round, Oliveira bullied Guida to the fence. The veteran tried to escape by attempting a double leg, but got caught in a guillotine.
What he's great at. It is so terrible.
There's the tap.
It was the Brazilian's 10th submission in the UFC, so he repeated the historic achievement of Royce Gracie, which lasted 24 years. In the post-fight interview, Charles asked to be returned to the 145 category and be put on the card in his native Sao Paulo. The matchmakers fulfilled only the second part of the request and offered him Christos Giagos. In the middle of the second round, Oliveira completed a takedown, carefully passed the guard, took the back, and tightened the noose. It was a perfect night. He won in front of his home audience, taking the 12th bonus of his career and setting a new record for the most submission wins in the Ultimate promotion. Charles tearfully begged to be reinstated in his very own division and promised to make weight, but the UFC management thought otherwise, so Oliveira had to roll with it and bulk up, gradually turning into a real lightweight. At the same time, Do Bronx polished his striking game, moving to Shootbox Academy to the coach, Diego Lima. Over the next 8 months, the Brazilian had 3 fights, the first of which was a rematch against Jim Miller, exactly 8 years since their first clash. Back then, it took Miller just 2 minutes to force the tap. Oliveira retaliated with a vengeance, spending 45 seconds less.
Jim Miller, you want to pressure, but what an attempt by Jim Miller, throwing the tips on both sides. Oh, he's in trouble. It's over.
There's the tap. Charles Oliveira does it again. Wow. And he had already broken the record, right?
The next victim was David Tamer, an up-and-comer with 5 consecutive wins in the UFC.
10 is the underdog.
Do Bronx decided to push the action on the feet,
Again, not on purpose. These things happen with the small gloves.
but got carried away.
Down now. Look at Oliveira's.
Oh, wow, a big shot by Tamer.
After regaining his verticality, he continued to press ahead.
Come in, fire your shots, and then move the record.
Put some striking on display as well.
The tactic paid off, with Oliveira landing a headache-maker elbow and then adding a bunch of punches by the fence for good measure.
Charles
And finally lassoing an anaconda around Tamer's neck.
submission, and there is
It was the fourth finish in a row. Each of them earned Charles a Performance of the Night bonus.
Like this, you've got no sense of...
DuBronx was included into the top 15 lightweight fighters for the first time, ranking behind Nate Diaz and James Vick. The champion was Khabib, who still could not meet Tony. The final part of the trilogy against Nick Lentz catapulted Oliveira even higher. Charles felt more confident on his feet with each performance, and properly bashed Lentz late in the first round.
He's really trusting.
Now Lentz fires back to right cross himself. Oh, wow, a leaping front kick to the face.
In the second lap, everything came to a logical end.
Big right from Oliveira. Hammer fist. Nick Lentz is down. Charles Oliveira.
Oliveira grabbed Nick's leg, threw him for a loop with the right, and finalized the fight. It was his first knockout notched up in the UFC.
Catching the kicks of Nick Lentz and landing that beautiful straight right hand.
6 months later, the second one ensued. The Brazilian did not miss the chance to perform on his native land, accepting a bout with the unrated Jared Gordon, and nailed a one-hitter quitter in just a minute and a half.
On Instagram, if you give him a follow, you see him, he's been working on that a lot.
Wow! It's out! Wow! Power from Charles Oliveira!
The progress in striking game became obvious.
And then bang! Right hand on the money. Gordon went.
Charles remained ranked 13th. His winning streak reached 6 victories, and all of them were scored inside the distance. DuBronx gave loud interviews and claimed to be the only real threat to the champion. Some laughed at this, but Oliveira gradually made his haters laugh on the wrong side of their mouths. In March 2020, Charles finally got an opponent from the top 10. The leading MMA hole seeker, Kevin Lee, arrived in Brazil and did not make weight. Due to the lockdown, no fans were allowed into the arena this time, so the headliners had to perform in pure silence. As the host, Oliveira occupied the center of the cage and rushed for a takedown, but Lee successfully counterattacked and ended up on top.
Opens himself up for a single leg though.
Kevin gets on top.
Charles was active from below and threatened with leg locks.
Wisely does that, but now he can go to a regular heel hook.
After the break, Kevin increasingly backed up to the fence and worked poorly in defense.
Get busy here in the early going.
Beautiful
Round number 2.
Look at that. Charles is growing in confidence here, starting to mix it up.
Oh, Lee lands with a right hand here, so too does Oliveira.
The wrestling turned out to be saving for him.
As he returns to his feet, Oliveira...
In the third round, Lee decided not to change his tactics and immediately dived for the leg. This time around, Oliveira did not miss a chance. Kevin tapped out, but chose to pretend that nothing had happened. Fortunately, the referee was not convinced by his claims. DuBronx was tied with Donald Cerrone when it came to the most finishes in the UFC. With his streak of 7 consecutive executions, Oliveira was second only to Anderson Silva, who had managed to accomplish 8. The 30-year-old Brazilian became ranked 7th and wanted to confront either Tony or Khabib, who were preparing for a dream fight in 2 months. But the pandemic disrupted all those plans. Nurmagomedov could not fly out of Russia, and Gaethje beat Ferguson. Charles could have fought Beneil Dariush in October, but this showdown fell through. In turn, Tony tried to call out Poirier or Chandler, but these options became irrelevant. At the end of the day, Oliveira was the only one who accepted the challenge. He agreed to take on El Cucuy in December 2020, with less than 3 weeks to prepare. Even without a proper camp, DuBronx confidently closed the distance and executed 1 takedown in each round.
Cyberpunk 26 PlayStation, PC, and Stadia rated.
That's never good to see as a guy.
He would prevent Ferguson from getting back on his feet, and came next to beating the fight clock twice. It was only thanks to Tony's superhuman grit and the buzzer that Charles did not score yet another submission.
Oh, my goodness. He might have broken it.
DuBronx soared into the top 3, and a month and a half later, UFC 257 took place, after which the lightweight division became a whole new ballgame.
Warrior!
Khabib retired altogether. Poirier finished Conor and became the prime challenger for the vacant belt. Right behind Oliveira was Chandler, who had gate-crashed the UFC impressively by knocking out Dan Hooker. Soon there were only two real contenders left. Poirier chose a profitable rematch with McGregor, while Gaethje was not even considered in this capacity in the wake of his title fiasco. Therefore, Oliveira and Chandler fought for the vacant gold. The Brazilian got the championship fight after 27 performances in the octagon. A road to the crown has never been so long in the history of the promotion. The bout headlined the UFC 262 and turned into an instant classic.
Sports drink of UFC.
Dubronx scored a takedown in the first minute but got stuck in a guillotine.
Left hands from Chandler.
Chandler's got a guillotine.
Then Charles found himself behind Michael's back and threatened with a choke.
Depending on how Michael reacts to this. Oh, back.
Chandler's doing a good job of hand fighting in that.
Chandler defended and retaliated with a devastating attack.
Forward motion here under 2 minutes to go in the round. There's that left hand.
He's in real trouble.
Michael dropped the opponent and tried to finish him off on the ground, but the Brazilian endured until the end of the round and was saved by the bell. Right after the break, the American made a mistake and paid dearly for it.
Gets underway. Chandler working off of that jab early. Surprise! Charles Oliveira is the champion!
A utopian left hook brought the former Bellator star down to earth. At the age of 31, with 28 fights in the UFC, Oliveira finally tied on the belt, turning the career of a journeyman into a success story. Just 2 months later, Dustin Poirier completed the trilogy with Conor in his favor and became the #1 contender. It was Poirier who enjoyed the status of an odds-on favorite in the run-up to the main event of UFC 269. The champion did not change his usual tactics and went ahead.
Early right hand gets through for
something he immediately was punished for.
Now an elbow from Charles.
The fighters launched into an exchange.
Good straight left by Poirier.
Already 25 connections for Poirier. Ooh, nice uppercut from the champ.
The Diamond was more accurate with his hands.
2.5 gone by round one.
Ooh, good left hand by Poirier.
Overhand right.
Oh, big right hand over the top. He's in trouble. Oh, Oliveira's in real trouble. Liver.
There's a big right from Poirier.
Charles continued to absorb heavy shots from the challenger.
By Poirier. And another walking difference is huge.
Sometimes responding with his own.
Charles counters with an elbow.
And a big one. Oh, Oliveira caught him.
The Brazilian kicked off the second round with a break-in into clinch, from where Oliveira pulled Poirier to the ground and secured the top position all the way until the buzzer.
Oh, and another.
So perhaps strategic for Poirier, but a big round two for Charles Oliveira.
In the third lap, exhausted Dustin turned into the Blood Diamond and became an easy trophy for the Bronx resident.
It's under the neck. He's
Charles Oliveira down. Still the undisputed.
Charles Oliveira secured the belt. Dariush and Makhachev never slugged it out, and fresh blood emerged in the top 15 thanks to Fiziev and Gamrot. Subsequent to the first offense, the camera showed Justin Gaethje for a reason. A month earlier, the highlight produced a fight of the year against Michael Chandler, having earned a title shot for himself.
Wow, what a fight!
They met in May 2022. Oliveira missed the weight by ½ a pound and for the first time in UFC history was stripped of the championship belt due to a failed weigh-in.
Oliveira.
The duel pretty much repeated Charles's last battle.
Gaethje in blue, Oliveira in the black and gold, defending a champ.
He was knocked down twice again in the first round.
Oh, he hurt again.
Oh my goodness.
Beautiful combination for Gaethje.
However, Gaethje did not get into grappling, sitting on every strike instead.
There's that Gaethje leg kick. Now he's loading up.
Gaethje is loading up.
Oh, big left from Gaethje.
But quickly grew tired.
Kicked him again.
Do Bronx made another comeback.
Gaethje back to work on the leg kick, landed a right hand.
After dropping the challenger with the ballistic right cross, he forced him to tap out.
He can't let him take his back. Oh, he's going to go to sleep. Oh, my
That is going to do it!
This dude right here, man.
Charles Oliveira!
Officially, Oliveira lost the champ status, but nobody had any doubts as to who the reigning king in the lightweight division actually was. Charles went on a streak of 11 consecutive wins and completely turned around his career. During his winding path to fame, he collected record-breaking achievements. 19 finishes in the UFC, 16 submissions, and 18 total fight night bonuses. According to these parameters, Do Bronx is the leader in the history of the promotion. But despite all his athletic regalia, the Brazilian remembers his roots. Charles has been developing his own social program for a long time and helps children study jiu-jitsu for free at his gym. After defeating Tony, Oliveira personally distributed food on the streets of his hometown, Guarujá. When Charles brought home the championship belt, thousands of people greeted him in the favelas. Do Bronx is a real symbol, an epitome of not giving up under any circumstances. 6 years ago, Oliveira was forced to go up to the heavier division and say goodbye to his title prospects. But now Charles is the best lightweight on the planet, making people wonder what the outcome of his dream fight with Khabib Nurmagomedov could be. If you liked the video and want to see more stories with detailed rankings, choke the like button, subscribe to our channel, and vote for sport.
Oh, he's got injuries and all sorts of trouble.
Because Oliveira going to take his back.
Man, nice transition.
He's on the round the back of the head. Nick Lentz couldn't go out here. That's never good to see as a guy starts.
He was on Instagram. If you give him a follow, you see him. He's been working on that a lot.
Ruby and choke here, and he's got it. It's all over. Counts. Trying for another submission, and there is the tap.
Chandler working off of that jab early.
Oh!